It's Ron Reader digs the universe. I'm Ron Reader, and this is Ron Reader Digs the Universe, and tonight, John Lennon and me. On this day, December 8th, in 1980, John Lennon was murdered outside his apartment in New York City by a crazy guy who was allowed access to a gun for some reason. I was 12 years old and deeply into my first and probably heaviest Beatles obsession phase. I had never lost anyone close or significant to me, so it didn't hit me at first. The local album-oriented radio station, rock-oriented radio station, KLOL, played a Beatles A to Z show the next day, and I was like, roll tape, doing the 80s equivalent of downloading almost the entire catalog of Beatles songs, but it did eventually hit me, and I cried in my mother's arms. I couldn't understand it then. I was just too young, but John Lennon had already taken up residence inside my head in the best of ways, and he's still here with me today, 40 years later. John Lennon was why I learned how to play guitar, how to write and perform my own songs, which admittedly all sound like thinly veiled Beatles rip-offs, but you know, I have a lot of fun with them. John was why I discovered that I have a knack for writing the song as personal attack piece. Sure, you know, Dylan was doing it first, but John's How Do You Sleep, you know, about Paul after the breakup, blew me away and got me thinking. John's occasional usage of absurd language, like in I Am the Walrus or Sun King, first got me thinking about absurdity on an artistic level, how it affects an audience struggling to construct meaning. Actually, John got me thinking about a lot. A couple of years after he died, a Beatle buddy handed me a copy of Nicholas Schaffner's book, Beatles Forever, a critical biography, weaving together the tale of the Beatles with critical analysis of their work. And so from that point on, John became a figure of intellectual as well as emotional significance to me. It was no longer simply that the songs are great, but also why the songs are great and what John was thinking and doing with his life and how it affected the music. Entirely new realms of thought were open to me now, and John Lennon was my guide through all of that. One of those fascinating, those realms of thought fascinating me early on and to this very day is addressing politics and rock and roll. John's political songs in the early 70s were roundly condemned by critics at the time. I'm sympathetic. Political songs are tricky stuff. I have found with my own songwriting. It's really easy to alienate your audience, and I'm always experimenting with, you know, how to get these ideas across in rock and roll form. But in spite of what the critics said at the time, John's political stuff has aged pretty well, I think, largely because he led with his heart and he offered an authenticity and pure perception of the truth as he understood it. Indeed, this constant search for and insistence on truth with the capital T, all I want is the truth, just give me some truth. Well, that's one of the most striking and admirable aspects about who he was. Musical experimentation, as with the Beatles' psychedelic years, was searching for truth. His deep introspection and self-analysis, as with the Plastic Ono Band LP, was searching for truth. His willingness to do the unthinkable as an artist and damn the critics was insistence on the truth. I think you've also got to look at John's marriage to Yoko as part of the search for truth. Yoko Ono was a very successful artist in the New York City avant-garde art scene, which means she wasn't blues-based, guitar-oriented pop music, so the critics hated her. But John John was really onto something with Yoko. Their union was a symbolic fusing of high and low art, indeed of all the arts, eradicating creative barriers that had existed in Western civilization for centuries. I mean, they weren't the only ones doing it at the time, but they were probably the only ones who literally embodied it with how they lived their lives. My takeaway from all that? As an artist, everything is fair game, creative freedom. I think you've also got to situate, as part of John's search for truth with the capital T, the two ideas for which he is probably best known. Love as an abstract concept and its fellow traveler, peace. They are together the foundation for everything I believe. Their value as supreme principles is obvious, but it is also obvious that a big portion of the human race just won't go there. And that's why the notions of love and peace must be pushed at every opportunity, just as John Lennon taught me when I was a boy. This all, of course, is a very incomplete meditation. It's kind of impossible for me to sum up the absolute enormity of this man's impact on my life. Suffice it to say that I would not be the man I am today. The stuff I'm proud of, were it not for John Lennon. I'm Ron Reeder, and this has been Ron Reeder Digs the Universe. Join me, Ron Reeder, again next week for another episode of Ron Reeder Digs the Universe.